Imagine walking through a desert so silent, your own heartbeat feels louder than the wind. Every grain of sand seems to whisper doubt. You're not going to make it. Your lips are cracked. Your skin burns under the relentless sun. And there's no sign of water, no sign of life. You start to wonder, did God bring me here to die? But what if the wilderness isn't the end? What if the dry ground under your feet is the very place where promises take root? Stay with me tonight, because this is more than a story about survival. It's about a God who never walks away. Before we dive in, if stories like this bring you peace or hope, consider liking this video and subscribing. Not to chase numbers, but so we can keep walking through these sacred moments together. Now, take a breath. Close your eyes for a second if you want. Feel that imaginary breeze on your face. This is the wilderness, and we're about to hear its secrets. The Israelites were free, but freedom isn't as simple as walking out of Egypt. Sometimes, freedom means facing emptiness before you can see abundance. They had crossed the Red Sea. They had seen the waters part like walls of glass. They had danced, celebrating their deliverance. But just 3 days later, thirst hit, and panic followed. The bitter waters. They came to a place called Marah. The water there was so bitter they couldn't drink it. Imagine the disappointment. Your lips ache for water, but every sip burns with bitterness. People cried out, "What will we drink?" And that's when God whispered through Moses. Moses threw a piece of wood into the water, and the bitterness turned sweet. It's a strange detail, isn't it? A single piece of wood changing the taste of an entire spring. Here's a fascinating fact. Ancient Jewish tradition says that the wood Moses used might have come from a specific desert tree known for its natural sweetening properties. Whether it's true or symbolic, that moment wasn't just about quenching thirst. It was a preview. God can transform what is bitter into something life-giving. A God who provides. But the wilderness tests don't end with one miracle. When their stomachs growled and food ran out, panic rose again. Why did God bring us here? Wouldn't it have been better to stay in Egypt? We read their words now and judge. But think about it, hunger makes people forget hope. Desperation can blur every memory of freedom. The bread of heaven. Then manna came. In the quiet of dawn, when the desert air was cool, they woke to find the ground covered with something fine and white, like frost. What is it? They asked. Because they had never seen anything like it. The name stuck. Manna literally means, "What is it?" The Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day." Exodus 16:4, they gathered it every morning, except on the Sabbath. They learned to trust a rhythm, daily bread for daily need. The taste of promise. Here's a little known detail. According to ancient texts, manna didn't have just one flavor. It tasted like what each person needed most. Some described it as sweet like honey, others like rich olive oil or bread fresh from an oven. It's as if God was saying, "I know what satisfies you. I know what your soul craves." A lesson for the heart. The wilderness isn't just about survival. It's about learning dependence, trusting that what you need will arrive right on time, even if you don't understand the how. You may not wake up to bread on the ground tomorrow, but what if the manna for your life is hidden in the small mercies you often overlook? The conversation that lifts you up, the unexpected provision, the whisper of hope when you're ready to give up. Night in the desert. Picture this. Night falls on the camp of Israel. The desert sky glows with thousands of stars, each one like a quiet reminder of the God who promised Abraham, "Your descendants will be as countless as these." And in the stillness, the smell of manna lingers from that day's meal. Children sleep. Mothers sigh with relief. And somewhere, Moses stares at the horizon, wondering if tomorrow will bring yet another test. Because wilderness journeys are rarely about one miracle. They're about a series of small, daily choices to believe. Maybe you're in a wilderness right now. It might not be made of sand and heat, but it feels just as dry, just as endless. What if you paused tonight to ask, what's my manna? What provision am I missing because I'm too focused on the lack? The Israelites didn't just survive in the desert. They learned that God's presence is enough even when the landscape screams otherwise. Because next, we'll step into one of the most dramatic moments. When thirst threatened to break the people completely. And God answered from the unlikeliest place. Have you ever been so thirsty, your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth? So dry inside, no words come out, just silent prayers. Wilderness thirst isn't just physical, it's spiritual. And sometimes, when you cry out for water, what you're really longing for is assurance that God still sees you. When water runs out, they had seen water turn sweet. They had tasted manna from heaven, but now they needed water again. Real, cool, flowing water. And there was none. In Exodus 17, the people quarreled with Moses, "Give us water to drink." But Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" They were thirsty. Their children were crying. Their animals were fading in the heat. And fear turned to blame. "Why did you bring us out of Egypt, kill us and our children and livestock with thirst?" A crisis at Rephidim. This wasn't just a complaint, it was a breakdown of trust. Even after all the miracles, they couldn't see past the moment. And maybe that's what wilderness does. It strips away memory and future, until only now remains. And in now, pain often speaks louder than faith. Moses, weary and burdened, cried to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." It was a moment of danger, a leader under pressure. A people on the edge of revolt, a God who doesn't answer right away. Or so it seemed. The rock and the staff, God responded, but not how anyone expected. "Go out in front of the people. Take some of the elders with you and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile. And I will stand before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." Exodus 17:5-6. There it is again, the staff. The same staff that touched the Nile and turned it to blood, now would bring water from stone. The strangest miracle. Moses walked forward. The people watched, confused. What was he doing with a dry rock in the middle of the wilderness? He raised the staff. He struck the rock. And suddenly, water gushed out. Not drops. Not a trickle. A flow wide enough to quench the thirst of thousands. It's one of the most unlikely scenes in all of Scripture. Here's something fascinating. Modern geologists studying desert rock formations in Sinai have found evidence of ancient split boulders with signs of water erosion in places where no water currently flows. Is it proof? Maybe not definitive, but it reminds us sometimes faith leaves a footprint, even in stone. A God who stands before, notice God's words. "I will stand before you by the rock at Horeb." He didn't just send water. He said, "I will be there." In Jewish tradition, this line is shocking. God doesn't stand before men. Men stand before God. But here, God places himself in front, almost as if to say, "Your thirst is mine too. Your need, I feel it. I'm not distant. I'm right here." A place called Massah and Meribah, Moses named the place Massah testing and Meribah quarreling, because that was the day the people tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" That question lingers. Is he still with us? Is he still providing, even when I don't see it? Wilderness moments press the question into our hearts. When we demand, not ask, here's a truth that stings. God didn't rebuke the people for needing water. He answered, but he did mark the place because they demanded in anger instead of trusting in remembrance. God can handle our needs. He can handle our cries. But what grieves him is when we forget who he's already proven himself to be. The water beneath the surface. Have you ever wondered why God chose to bring water from a rock? He could have sent clouds. He could have made a spring appear suddenly. But he picked the most unlikely source. Maybe it was to show us something important. That sometimes, the provision we seek is already near, hidden inside the impossible. Just like that rock. A deeper water. Early church writers believed that rock represented Christ. The Apostle Paul even wrote, they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ. 1 Corinthians 10:4. The water in the desert wasn't just survival. It was a shadow of what was coming. A Savior who would be struck, so that living water could flow. Where are you standing today? Maybe your heart is at Rephidim. Frustrated, tired, asking, is the Lord among us or not? What if your rock moment is closer than you think? And what if the thirst you feel isn't a sign of absence, but an invitation to trust? Because the God of the wilderness doesn't leave his people dry. He waits for the moment when your eyes lift from the sand to see the stone that holds your answer. We'll witness a new kind of battle, one not fought with swords, but lifted hands. And we'll see how even in war, the wilderness reveals the faithfulness of God. Let's keep going. What if the hardest battles in your life aren't won by striving, but by surrender? What if the real victory doesn't come when your hands are full, but when they're lifted? If stories like these stir your soul, I invite you to like this video and subscribe, not to grow a channel, but to grow together in grace. These aren't just stories. They're survival for the soul. The Amalekites' attack just when the people found water at Rephidim, just when thirst was quenched, a new danger came. They didn't see it coming, but it came swiftly, violently. Amalek, a desert tribe, attacked Israel from behind where the weak, the elderly, and the tired walked. It was a cowardly strike, not a fair fight. It wasn't just physical, it was spiritual warfare. And for the first time, Israel would have to fight as a people. Moses' strange battle plan. Moses told Joshua, "Choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands." Exodus 17:9. A staff again. It wasn't a sword. It wasn't armor. It was the same staff that parted the sea, brought water from rock, and now would stretch toward heaven in a battle for survival. Hands raised, victory gained. As the battle began, Joshua fought on the field. But up on the hill Moses lifted his hands toward the sky, staff in hand. And something unusual happened. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites gained the advantage. Exodus 17:11. Victory came not from strength, but from the posture of surrender. It wasn't about shouting louder or fighting harder. It was about staying connected to the one who gives victory. A leader grows weary, but Moses couldn't hold his arms up forever. He grew tired, and as his arms sank, hope began to slip on the battlefield. That's when something beautiful happened. Aaron and Hur took a stone and put it under him for support. Then they stood on either side of him and held up his hands, one on each side, so that his hands remained steady until sunset. Exodus 17:12. This is one of the most sacred images in the wilderness. Not a man standing alone, but a leader upheld by others. God fights through our unity. Joshua overwhelmed the Amalekite army, and Moses stood, supported by brothers. The victory was not just in lifted hands, but in shared strength. And God said to Moses afterward, "Write this on a scroll as something to be remembered." Exodus 17:14. Because some victories must never be forgotten. Not because of who fought, but because of who fought through them. The forgotten history of Amalek. Here's a deeper layer many don't know. The Amalekites didn't just attack Israel. They ambushed the rear, where the vulnerable walked. Remember what Amalek did to you when you were weary and worn out. They met you on your journey and attacked all who were lagging behind. Deuteronomy 25:17-18. God called it evil. He promised justice would come. Centuries later, King Saul was commanded to destroy Amalek, but disobeyed. And generations after that, Haman, an Amalekite, would rise in Persia and plot genocide against the Jews in Esther's time. It all began here, in the wilderness. Even in the desert, God sees the bigger story. Jehovah Nissi, the Lord is my banner. After the battle, Moses built an altar. He named it something that has echoed through generations. Jehovah Nissi, the Lord is my banner. A banner isn't just a flag. It's a rallying point, a declaration of identity, a symbol that says, "This is who we belong to. This is who fights for us." Moses didn't say, "Joshua is our banner." Not, "Our weapons are our banner." He said, "The Lord is our banner." There will be moments in your life when enemies strike without warning, when the thirst is barely quenched before another hardship begins. And you'll wonder, how can I keep going? In those moments, remember the lesson of the hill. Victory doesn't come from clenched fists, but from lifted hands. And when your arms are tired, let others lift them with you. Find your Aaron, find your Hur. Because some promises are fulfilled not in solitude but in shared surrender. Final thoughts. The wilderness didn't destroy Israel. It revealed them. It showed their weakness and God's strength, their hunger and His provision, their battles and His victories. And it gave them a name to hold on to, Jehovah Nissi. So wherever you are in your journey, thirsty, tired, or under attack, remember this: you are not alone in the wilderness, and your banner still waves over every dry place, over every broken cry, over every battle scar. His name is your promise, and He is not done with your story yet. If this message reminded you of the strength that comes from God alone, like and subscribe to join us again, not for views, but for the view ahead. We're walking this wilderness together, and we are not without hope. The rock and the thirst Exodus 17 to 1 to 7. Have you ever been so thirsty, not just for water, but for something deeper? When your soul is parched, and you wonder, has God forgotten me? The Israelites reached a place called Rephidim, but there was no water. None. Not a drop for the women, the children, the animals. The heat pressed down. The dust choked their breath. And just like before, fear started to rise. But here's something unusual, something most people miss. They were exactly where God led them. Not lost. Not mistaken. God brought them to a place with no water. They weren't being punished. They were being prepared. And yet, panic took over. They quarreled with Moses, "Give us water to drink." They were not just thirsty, they were angry, accusing, desperate. Moses cried out to God, fearing they would stone him. "What shall I do with this people?" And God, calm as always, gave a command that seemed again illogical. "Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile and go." The same staff that brought judgment to Egypt would now bring life to Israel. Moses walked ahead with elders watching. And there, at the rock of Horeb, he struck the stone, and out poured water. Water gushing, pure, enough for all, in the most unlikely place, from a rock. But here's the part that often goes unnoticed. This wasn't just about physical thirst. Paul, centuries later, would write that this rock was more than stone. They drank from the spiritual rock, and that rock was Christ. 1 Corinthians 10-4. In the wilderness, the people didn't just receive water. They received a glimpse of grace, a shadow of the one who would be struck so that we might live. And yet, they named the place Massah and Meribah, testing and quarreling, because they questioned if the Lord was really among them. How many times have we done the same? God provides, but our fears scream louder. He shows up, but we forget. Still, He remains faithful, even when we test, even when we question, even when we don't understand. Exodus 17-7. Is the Lord among us or not? It's a question whispered through every trial. But the answer is always the same: yes. Yes, He is here. Yes, He sees. Yes, He provides. Even when the water comes from a rock, He calls it testing. He calls you mine. Exodus 17-8-16. They were still in the wilderness, still weary, still wondering, still needing to believe that the promise would hold in a place that looked so dry. But just as they took a sip from the water that flowed from the rock, a new threat appeared. The Amalekites came to fight them. Not in Egypt, not at the Red Sea, but here in the middle of provision. It's a truth we often forget. Breakthroughs are often followed by battles. As the people drank, wiped the dust from their eyes, and tried to rest, war was at their doorstep. Moses called for Joshua. "Choose some men and go fight Amalek. I'll stand on the hill with the staff of God in my hand." Joshua obeyed. The men went. And on the hill, Moses stood with Aaron on one side, her on the other. Here's what happened next, something extraordinary, something divine. Exodus 17:11. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed, and whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses grew tired. He couldn't hold his arms up forever. So Aaron and her faithful friends held his hands high, one on each side. They found a stone for him to sit on, and together they formed a living picture of what happens when faith stands together. That day, Israel won, but not because of their weapons, not because they were strong. They won because God's presence upheld them through Moses, through unity, through surrender. After the battle, the Lord gave Moses a command. Exodus 17:14. Write this down so Joshua will remember. Why? Because one day, Joshua would lead, and he would need to remember that victory was never about him. It was always about the Lord. Moses built an altar that day. He didn't name it Victory or Strength or Israel the Great. He named it Exodus 17-15. The Lord is my banner, Yahweh Nissi. Not we fought well, but He covered us. Not we were fearless, but He stood over us. Even in the wilderness, God didn't just provide manna. He didn't just give water. He gave them His name. He gave them identity. And that's the promise we carry too. In the middle of your testing, He is not absent. In the middle of your battles, He is not defeated. In the wilderness, where fear and doubt whisper loud, He raises His banner over you. Not because of your strength, but because of His love. He calls it testing. He calls you mine.